Live from Palm Beach County and for the rest of the world, 98.3 Espas FM.
WNGK LP 102.1 FM, Plantation, Florida.
Good morning, Steve Esco here, 98.3 FM. We have a special guest in the studio, Mr. Ronnie Burke. And Ronnie Burke, he's the author of The Plastic Magician. And give everybody a fast synopsis about what this book is about, where you're from. You lead a very interesting life. Not only did you write this book, but there's also going to be a movie made about your life, because your life is more interesting than the book. But let's let everybody know what this book is about. Thank you, Ronnie.
Well, thank you, Steve. I want to thank you for this opportunity to promote my book. We've been friends for over 6 years, and I'm really grateful for this. I want to wish you and everybody here at the studio and all of your listeners a great New Year's. This story about one of the greatest con artists of all time, it's a true life crime story that I wrote 37 years ago while I was doing prison time in FCI, Federal Penitentiary in Tallahassee, where I met Arturo Hoyo in 1983 for ripping off American Express for over $8 million in credit cards. And his story was on the front pages of the Miami Herald, and I was fortunate enough to get to know him while I was in Tallahassee. I've been smuggling and selling drugs my whole life, practically, besides having legitimate businesses in Wall Street, Playboy Club, and running Bobby Rubino's Place for Ribs for many years.
Bobby Rubino's Place for Ribs? Which
that
one?
was in Tallahassee, in Tamarack. I opened up the Bobby Rubino's on Federal Highway in Fort Lauderdale.
Which is still in business.
Bobby Rubino and my friend Ronnie Impellitteri and myself both came down from New York and opened up these franchises. And when I got sentenced to my 23 years for smuggling and for marijuana possession and distribution, I met Arturo, and it just so happens that he happened to be a pot smoker also. And while I was in Tallahassee for the 54 months that I was there, I probably became one of their worst nightmares, constantly getting in trouble. I did over 6 months in solitary confinement with 3 dirty urines for marijuana. And
what made you do solitary?
Well, I had the 3 dirty urines for marijuana, and turned out in 1983 the federal government wanted to have all the federal prisons piss test 10% of their population. And the population at the time when I got to Tallahassee was about 475 inmates. And I had the most time out of anybody that was there. So I figured this is my new home, and I'm going to do the time my way. And I hooked up with somebody, and I started smuggling in marijuana into Tallahassee. And I never sold it. I gave it away to friends, because I know in the federal government, they don't want you to make money on their time. So they want a certain amount of drugs in the federal institutions to calm the tempers, especially during the summer. So they allow a certain amount. So they all knew that I always had marijuana. So
How did you smuggle it?
Well, this was one of the best stories. I had a good friend, Frank Sladek, and he was working in the safety department, and he had a gate pass. So every 2 weeks, he would take the fire extinguishers and go into town and fill up the fire extinguishers and get them certified. So I had some people drive up from Fort Lauderdale, and they put 1 pound of marijuana broken up into half-ounce keisters. Keisters is a balloon that is used for people to use it to bring it in through their rectum. And we used to put a bag in the gas station underneath the sink, almost like the movie in The Godfather where they put the gun behind the toilet bowl. And he would come in and he would take the marijuana and put it in the fire extinguisher. And he would bring it in through the gates every 2 weeks. There was a fire extinguisher 3 beds down from where I was sleeping that at one time had 32 ounces of marijuana and hash. So I was constantly smoking all the time while I was there and never lost a beat. And
But didn't they drug test you?
well, that's what happened. When they started giving the drug testing, I never held my marijuana. I always had people that were non-smokers, that were older guys, that were holding my marijuana for me because I was constantly being shaken down. They even tore my tennis racket apart.
You had a tennis racket in jail?
Oh, yeah, I played tennis practically, 8 hours, 9 hours a day.
You had your own?
I had my own, yeah. I was
jail?
I was the kosher cook, and after I finished cooking, I would go out to the rec field, and I would play tennis and work out. And it just so happens that I met Jose Tang, a guy who got a scholarship to FIU for tennis, and he decided to bring in 2 kilos of cocaine into the United States, and so he was my tennis partner.
I can see why they're making a movie about this guy. I mean, he wrote a book about some drug smuggler that made the headlines of the Miami Herald, but this guy's life is... You got a Jew here named Berkowitz and stuff. He's in jail for 10 years for smuggling through rectums or whatever and stuff. This guy's like unbelievable. With his own tennis racket in jail yet. Unbelievable. Gets better.
Yeah, I mean, it got to the point where I was working in woodworking VT, a 2-year course, learning how to make boats. I made jewelry boxes with false bottoms, and I made them hold up like to a little Beretta, up to 20,000 in cash, and I used to send out the cocaine that was $1,200 an ounce to friends out in the street in jewelry boxes.
How much an ounce?
$1,200 an ounce.
I got to put a call into Chi-Chi, Angel Salazar. I have to see if that's a good deal.
And I was selling it for $1,600, sending it out to people. They kept telling me how crazy I was, smuggling stuff out of prison. But anyway, Arturo became very friendly with me because we were pot smokers.
Arturo is this...
Arturo is
drugs,
Arturo Hoyo is the plastic magician.
The plastic magician who scammed American Express over $8 million.
Right. And Arturo, once we got piss tested, there was over 80 people that came back positive out of the 400 and some odd people in the federal prison. So they didn't know what to do. So they derived of a cell in the cell house. They took a range of cells, 9 cells, and we called it piss test row. And piss test row was everybody that got a dirty urine had to do 30 days in solitary.
Really?
So they put 2 people in a cell, and every 30 days they would rotate until all 80 people
were
clear and doing their 30 days. So people were saving the marijuana that they were smoking on the compound because they had a date to go into the cell house, either 30 days or 60 days, coming up. So it just turned out that it was fortunate and fate that Arturo and I were in the same cell. And I was there doing my appeal. I did my own appeal. So during
you had no attorney?
No, I had an attorney for my case, but as far as my appeal goes, I handled my own appeal.
Did you go to school for being?
I had two attorneys in my family. My first cousin was the Attorney General of New York, Lefkowitz.
Oh, Lefkowitz, really? That was your cousin?
And he wrote a couple of. When I won my case in New York, which was probably one of the biggest travesties of justice for myself, I was indicted. I was facing 45 years for cocaine possession under the Rockefeller law. And
Bush was the president at that time?
Yeah, and this was back in 1976, and it was the same time that Berkowitz, son of Sam, who everybody kept calling me, was sentenced to 25 years to life. So I was marked for trial for 2 years, and for 2 years I kept coming up to the court, and they kept postponing my case, saying they couldn't find the witness, and they kept marking the postponements in the wrong column on purpose, saying that I was putting it off instead of the prosecution putting it off. And I kept flying back and forth from Florida to Manhattan just to go to court, just to find out that they postponed the case again. So the judge found me, the jury found me guilty, but the judge who could have thrown out the case didn't, because he said, what they did to you, they shouldn't be done to anybody else. So if I throw out this case, there's not going to be a record of it, and I'm not worried about it because the jury's going to find him innocent anyway. I didn't even take the witness stand because my co-defendant, my girlfriend at the time, was my co-conspirator.
So she helped you smuggle drugs?
Well, no, this was in a transaction that took place of a quarter of a pound of cocaine to an undercover person, to a confidential informant who I've known for many years. And they separated us. We couldn't go to trial as one. They separated us. And because I had an apartment in Manhattan, I had a house out in Queens, and the apartment in Manhattan where this transaction took place, she was living in there.
Sounds like Goodfellas.
Yeah.
Doesn't it?
So she was she was found guilty for possession of the cocaine and not conspiracy for the cocaine.
Did she do time?
Yeah, she did 18 months, and but she won her case when it was overturned with my case. When the jury found me guilty and sentenced me 2 to 6 years, the judge couldn't believe it. He said he knew he messed up, so he granted me bail pending appeal. I went to Rikers Island, and my bail was put up within 24 hours, but they kept me there for 3 days because they've never seen an order come down with conspiracy for cocaine and bail pending appeal.
In Rikers Island? You were in Rikers Island for 3 days? Let me ask you a question. Did you either accidentally or maybe on purpose drop the soap? And if you did you have like a date with your proctologist like a couple times a week or something?
Yeah, I had to have my own bodyguard.
I can imagine what I can't believe it, Rikers Island.
Yeah,
what was that like?
That was a treacherous place. They were extorting me to use the phone because the Spanish gangs and cartels were controlling the phone. So if you wanted to use the phone to call out, you had to give them commissary or give them money. And I wound up having to get, my cell was burnt out when I went out to one of my meals. I came back and my cell was on fire.
Really?
So it was, and they shouldn't have been holding me there because when I was granted bail pending appeal, I went back down to Tallahassee, and they put me on a bus that took 2.5 months to get back down to Tallahassee. It's what they call diesel therapy. You stop in every major federal institution on the way down, Lewisburg, every federal institution down there to Tallahassee. So while I was down there, I got to know Arthur, and we became really good friends. And because of that, I started writing his story, because I couldn't believe that this guy went through what he went through.
Now, he made the front page of the Herald or whatever and stuff.
Yeah. But this book is basically two stories in one, because how and why he became a scam artist all derived out of the fact that when he and his brother were living in Cuba, their family owned a big sugar plantation. And it was during the time when Castro and Batista were having their problems. And his father was very close to Batista, and he wanted to make sure that his sons and some money were taken out of Cuba in case anything was going to happen to him. So he entrusted his business partner with over $2 million in an attaché case to bring his sons to Miami to set up a trust fund, and him and his wife will be following. Well, the businessman brought him and his brother Felix to Miami, putting them up at the Fontainebleau Hotel. 5 days later, the business partner disappeared with all the money, and his parents' limousine and plantation was blown up and set afire. And Arturo and his brother left alone in Miami hotel, no money, no friends. Just an incredible story. And when I heard it, it brought always tears to my eyes to believe that somebody could do this to somebody. Arthur and his brother went into foster care, and it wasn't until 17 years later that fate played its chance and gave him a chance to reap revenge on his father's businessman. And this is the best part of the story, as far as I'm concerned, is the scam that he pulled to get the revenge of his father's murderers. And it wasn't found out until, again, 17 years later.
Just an amazing story.
Yeah.
I'm surprised they never made a movie about this author Arturo.
Well, to be honest with you, he did speak to Tony Scott, who in fact was the producer of The Sting. And The Sting was one of my favorite movies
great movie
of all times. And this con that Arturo pulled off makes the Sting look like child's play. And if you know the movie with Robert Redford and Paul Newman, you would see there was a scene in there that where they were painting one of the offices in the Telegraph just to try to get some information. And in Arthur's scheme, he had to paint over a building also to get the scam going. So it was really incredible. And
they did it, in one day or something, that they painted the building to make it look like a real building?
Like it was a real building. They took the offices of the manager and they started painting inside, and the guy went inside the office, put fake pictures of him and his family, believing that he was the one that was sending the wire of the horse races over the Telegraph. So Arthur, like I said, when he pulled the scam off and got revenge, that was the start of his illustrious career as a con artist. His brother didn't want to have anything to do with cons after that, so he just came out of the picture. But Arturo, after pulling this off, was so excited and felt that this was the easiest way to make money, was conning people. So after he ripped off this guy and got his $2 million I'm not going to tell you how the scam goes because
You won't sell any books.
yeah, but this book is it's a constantly a lot of twists and turns. When I first heard the story, and believe me, after doing 10 and a half years in federal prison, I've heard many stories from many con artists, but none of them has ever impressed me as much as the one that Arthur told me, because it was just too good to be true, and I really didn't believe it. But after reading the front pages of the Miami Herald, I couldn't help believe what was happening, because they had a special task force set up just because of Arturo ripping off American Express. The main investigator who came with Arturo to the Senate subcommittee in Washington, D.C., because Vice President Bush kept soliciting Arthur while he was doing time to try to help businesses and banking companies to prevent them from fraud from credit cards and computer scams. And Arturo was the main person that was creating over 20% of credit card fraud in South Florida.
Wow, 20% of all South Florida?
They
Wow.
said that New York was number one and Florida was number two, but Dade County was the highest. Out of something like $10 million in credit card fraud, over $7 million was attributed to Arthur. At one time was making $250,000 every 8 days. Every 8 days.
What's his phone number? Because I need to make some money.
Me too. Me too.
Every 8 days he was pulling in $250,000 in cash.
In cash?
In
Wow.
cash. And he was always one step ahead of the police.
It's just like Catch Me If You Can.
And it's funny you say that, because while I was writing this and talking to people, because I wrote this 37 years ago, and I kept telling people this story, they kept saying, oh yeah, there was a movie like that, Catch Me If You Can. And I finally saw the movie, and his character and his scams, they put that movie to shame.
Really?
I mean, if you like that movie, you're gonna love this book, because this book has him doing scams, and the way he sets it up is just sheer genius. I mean, he had people flying in from, and this is documented in the Senate subcommittee, and when you read the book, you'll read his testimony in front of the Senate subcommittee. It was documented that people were flying in from all over the world and from the United States, paying him $100,000 just to look at their scam and to see if he could help them do something with their scam.
This is incredible.
Organized crime approached him on 2 or 3 occasions because they wanted to get out of the drug business down here in Miami and Florida because of the violence that was taking place. And it started getting a little bit too much for them to handle the drugs and everything. So they wanted to get into credit cards and other
Safer bets.
safer bets, exactly. And Arturo was working with a couple of the organized families in helping them do all this.
This is incredible. How does a Jew from the Bronx get involved with drug smuggling? Have you ever heard anything when Linda's Jewish here? Have you ever heard of such a bad boy Jew like this guy?
Yes.
You did? Was it your ex-husband or something? No?
I guess I follow in my father's footsteps. He was the black sheep of the family.
What did he do?
His 2 brothers were both doctors, and he ran away from home at the age of 17, graduating high school before his 2 brothers, and joined up in the Marines. And he became a drill sergeant, and because he was a drill sergeant,
It wasn't Sergeant Carter
yeah.
from Gomer Pyle. Go ahead.
And he stayed in the United States training the troops. So for like I said, he was the black sheep, and I guess I always was always doing things my way.
But hasn't your mother or anybody taught you to do, be a nice guy and don't get in trouble instead of spending 10 years in jail?
I know. Thank God, unfortunately, both my parents passed away. See, fate played its chance. When I went to Vietnam after getting drafted out of working in Wall Street, I was faced for 18 months fighting for my life in Vietnam. We had there was one period where we fought for 3 days, captured an enemy base camp and flag, where I got wounded. And
what happened to you?
Well, a concussion grenade was thrown into my bunker, and I was going out the back way, and it just threw me out, and I lost my hearing for a while. And I was in the maxillofacial ward because my nose, and from the concussion, damaged my nose, and I spent like 30 days in the hospital. And because of that, they gave me another assignment. They made me an SG, which was a security guard, and sent me down into Saigon to get the civilians, protect the civilians and the other veterans who were going to the bars, and throw them out of the bars after the 10 o'clock curfew. So it was there in Saigon, riding around in an MP Jeep with an M60 machine gun mounted on my front hood, throwing and going around making sure that all of these veterans who were sneaking in from the field to get laid in these bars were out of the bars by 10 o'clock at night. And it was there that, since I don't smoke cigarettes and...
You don't smoke cigarettes?
No.
Donna, stay the hell away from them. You'll be smoking in seconds and coughing.
Yeah. My mother, may she rest in peace, died of lung cancer, so I couldn't,
Yeah, you don't want things bad for your health. You don't want you'd rather be in jail and stuff. Forget smoking.
So when I went ahead and got that position, I started sending marijuana back home to my friends in a Martell cognac box with cigarettes already rolled up. The box was $200, and in the 3 months I extended, they had a special thing, Diros, that if you had 6 months left in the service, you could leave and not have to do that 6 months back in the States. So I extended an extra 3 months in Saigon, and when I landed in San Francisco in 1969 on my birthday, I had $26,500 that I made from selling marijuana back to my friends here in the States. That was my start of my smuggling career.
Excuse me for a second, but Linda is looking for a nice Jewish guy from Brooklyn. Linda, can we interest you in this guy?
Yeah, so it's been... but getting back to the main thing about the book that really was fascinating was when I was doing the 30 days with Arturo and listening to his story. I was going back and forth from the law library and everything. I had my other friend became the kosher cook, so I was always getting a special meal when it was brought up to the cell house. So my friend would always put 1 or 2 joints wrapped up in plastic under my mashed potatoes or my spaghetti. And
I couldn't do stand-up better than this. I couldn't.
And I'd be smoking this at night and then writing down his story, and then in the afternoon go to the law library, work on my case, and write his story. And at the end of 30 days, when they came to get me, these people gave me another piss test. And we all knew that the marijuana could stay in your system for over 30 days. So they claimed that they smelled marijuana up on the range. One of the officers said that they smelled marijuana. They asked, who's up on that range? Oh, Berkowitz. Oh, it must be him. So they gave me the piss test. I went back down onto the compound, and within 2 weeks, it came back dirty. They put me back into the cell house for another 30 days, and then they gave me a disciplinary transfer. The disciplinary transfer took 2.5 months for me to leave the cell house.
What's a disciplinary
A disciplinary transfer is, since I was in a level 3-4 institution, they contact another federal institution, which they contacted Ashland, Kentucky, and they sent me to Ashland, Kentucky. But in order for me to get the bus to Ashland, Kentucky, I waited like 2.5 months in solitary, plus the 30 days in solitary, to get the disciplinary transfer to Ashland, Kentucky.
Do you enjoy jail or something? I mean,
No, but it gave me a lot of time to think about me and who I really am, and it was just one of those things. With all the time that I had to do the time my way.
I wouldn't survive one day in jail.
Yeah.
I really wouldn't. I don't know how many, but you've done it and you kept going back or whatever. And
Well, I kept going back because the federal institution should never have female parole officers doing and parole for male
why?
Why? Because they feel that if they don't violate you, they're not doing their job right. And they also feel that they're a woman in a man's job, and they want to try to show how they could be more forceful. And the parole system, when you come out, you think they're trying to help you reestablish yourself back into society, especially after all that time. When in essence, the parole board and their parole officers are trying to watch you with a fine-tooth comb. When I came out, because of the fact that I stood up for a couple of family members that were selling my product, the family put me with Michael Peters of the Dollhouse and Solid Gold.
I've heard of him. Yeah.
And so I started working at Solid Gold, and my parole officer, I had 32 piss tests the first year. She would, because I still had the electronic monitoring on my foot, I had to, my work schedule was from 10:30 in the morning until 7 o'clock at night, because I had to be home in my house by 9 o'clock. So she would come by and she would say, "Hey, listen, I need a piss test." I said, "I'm sorry, I can't go right now. I got to drink water." She goes, "All right, start drinking water." So I started drinking water, and during the course of the day, I still had to do my job. And one of my jobs was one of the dancers coming in and wanted to be hired. I have to take pictures of them with their clothes on.
Who's doing that job now? I want to create a job.
I mean, these are one of the benefits of being in celibacy for 10.5 years and coming out to working in a gentleman's club. It was like
Did you get any dates with these women?
Well, I don't like to shit where I eat.
Oh,
but
no, excuse us. I'm sorry. That was a mistake. Please do not use.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Okay,
But
no problem.
anyway, I believe that I just wanted to make sure I kept my job, but it was very frustrating having that carrot dangled in front of my face all the time. But when I got back to trying to get the girls situated, I started taking pictures, and the parole officers right there in the office watching me taking pictures with their clothes off, because if there are certain parts of their body that are exposed, we could be charged for lewd Vesuvius. So she says, "Listen, I need this piss." So she would come back and she said, "Don't piss without me." And she gave me a piss test, and it came back clean. But I had a friend of mine that was living in my house who was the director of operations for Bobby Rubino, and he was on my monthly report. So every month I would turn in my report, and then she came back to me and said, "You're associating with a convicted felon. In 1982, he had a possession of a concealed weapon. He used to make deposits of over $80,000 for Bobby Rubino's at night. He used to take the gun from the restaurant with him to the bank, went into Denny's, had the gun in his waistband, and the waitress saw the gun, called the police, and he got charged. And Bobby Rubino had to come to the trial.
There was a real Bobby Rubino?
Yes, it was. Bobby he owned 7 of his own restaurants.
I used to go to him in Brooklyn. They had a Bobby Rubino's.
Yeah, and they opened up in Manhattan on 74th Street also. Oh. And so Bobby went to bat for him, and this was in 1982. I was still doing time, so I had no idea that this had taken place. I mean, I'm putting him on my monthly report. So they gave me 11 months for a parole violation.
How many times were you in prison, and how long were the total?
Well, I did 7.5 straight up. After winning my appeal, I knocked down my sentence from 23 years to 17 years. And
I thought in federal prison you have to serve whatever time they give you.
Well, no, you see, I was under the old law because of Reagan. Reagan put the old law in that if you're a first-time offender, you're qualified to do 1/3 of your time. So I always told myself when I got into the business at the age of 21 that I'm just going to stay in this business until I take my first conviction, because usually you get a slap on the wrist and, no big thing. But because I was such a perfectionist, it took them 9.5 years and 2 trials to put me behind bars. So that's when they felt that they gave me all of the time, because of the fact that they knew about me, but they couldn't do anything about me. And the fact that my case right now in New York, if you pick up any law book in New York City, you're going to see Berkowitz versus the state of New York on the fast and speedy trial. I am the leading case to this date from 1976. I am the precedent case in New York. So I know that when I leave this world, there are going to be people that are using my case to fight their case for the fast and speedy trial.
Ronnie, I'm sorry to cut. We're going to have you on maybe 5 more shows to catch up with all this stuff. What's the matter, Donna?
Okay, you got to announce the Fern House.
Forget the Fern House right now.
You told me to.
I know, but he's got to promote where people can buy this book and stuff. That's more important right now because of his time that he spent here. I got to promote his book.
Well, thank you, Steve. I really would like to, hopefully, that I can get all of your listeners to...
We only have a couple of minutes.
To go to Amazon.com, Ronnie Burke, The Plastic Magician. It's $14.99 for the book. If you want a script that the 3 producers who read my script for the Plastic Magician, you could contact Steve or contact me. I will send you a script that is going to be used for the movie, for the Plastic Magician, for $20.
Which I will be in.
You could send it to me. My phone number is 954-600-9905, and I will send you out the script so you could read what this movie is going to be about. It's an incredible book, an incredible story, and believe me when I tell you, I got one of the biggest and most important producers that are making this a movie.
In Vegas, yes.
In Vegas. I showed Steve
He's got confidentiality agreements, so do not mention names and stuff. And
so, this is going to be the real deal, and I'm really excited about this, and I hope everybody can go order my book, because you're going to be amazed at the scams that this man pulled off, and you'll be wanting to tell all of your friends about it. So I want to thank you all for the interest and for listening to me today. Have a great, healthy New Year. And Steve, can't thank you enough for everything you've done for me through these years.